you have the buyer of healthcare, the health insurance plans, wanting healthcare costs to increase. You have the seller of health, big hospital systems. Clearly, they want the price to go up because they want their profit to go up. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out why healthcare costs go up.
An incorrect assumption that insurance is guaranteed, that insurance is safe because it's an entrenched institution that has been there forever.
1 out of every 6 healthcare claims are denied.
So there seems to be like a false sense of security with insurance.
You've got these massive deductibles that you have to pay before the health insurance plan pays $1. What we'll ask you to do is you pay the first $500, and then everything else we're going to submit to the crowd for funding. And so you don't have to worry about how much is this going to cost? What is my copay? What is my co-insurance? What is my deductible? What is my thing? It's like, it's $500. We want 0 people going bankrupt using CrowdHealth due to medical bills, as opposed to 250,000 using health insurance.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. HubSpot has been a huge supporter of the show since day one, and I chose to partner with HubSpot because they support entrepreneurs. At the end of the day, I'm an entrepreneur. A lot of people that listen to this show are entrepreneurs, and it's hard, and HubSpot creates solutions for entrepreneurs so it's not as difficult. One of the number one problems that all entrepreneurs have is keeping customers happy. It's one thing to acquire customers, keeping them happy, boosting customer satisfaction is a whole other can of worms. It's not easy, but there is an all new service hub from HubSpot, and it makes it infinitely easier to scale customer support and increase customer retention. Remember, the cheapest customer to acquire is a customer you already have. By bringing service and support together in one powerful platform, you can deliver the best experiences for your customers and your teams. You free up time for your reps, focus on complex issues because HubSpot has an AI-powered help desk. You proactively drive retention with customer health scores that keep your business ahead, stopping churn in its tracks, and give your entire go-to-market team the data they need to operate as one unified, powerful front. Also, you can easily support, strengthen, and grow your customer base. What's the point of acquiring customers if they all just leave? The secret's out. HubSpot's Service Hub is a game changer. Also, you can better connect with your customers and keep them happy. Visit HubSpot.com/service to do more for your customers today. Andy, bring it back. What's your origin story? Where'd you come from?
Yeah, I was running a healthcare technology company. We were doing remote patient monitoring. So we were monitoring folks directly from their home, those folks with chronic conditions. So if you had high blood pressure, or diabetes, or whatever it may be, we were monitoring your blood sugars, your blood pressure, your weight, all of those things, and had a call center of nurses who would watch that information. And if your blood pressure spiked or your blood sugar spiked, we would call you to intervene prior to going to the hospital. And I sold that company in 2014 to a private equity firm. And as many people do when they leave their companies, they lose their health insurance. So I went to healthcare.gov. I thought it was the only place I could get health insurance. And I got a plan for me, my wife, and my 2 girls that was about $1,200 a month. And it worked until I actually had to use it. So my little one, who was 1 at the time, was having recurring ear infections. And so we went to the ear, nose, and throat doctor, who told us that she needed tubes in her ear. She had perforated eardrums. And so we went to the hospital, got tubes in her ears. It's a 15-minute procedure, and we got the bill soon thereafter. It was $8,000. I was just blown away by the fact that a 15-minute procedure in our current healthcare system could be $8,000. And not only that, but my health insurance plan sent me a note via snail mail, interestingly, and said that it wouldn't pay for it because it was medically unnecessary. And so at that point, I was fed up. I was pissed off. I called my health insurance plan. I said, I quit. If you guys can't pay my bills, then I'm not interested in being your customer. And so I quit, and my family have been uninsured for the last 2 years. And during that time, we built tools to allow people to operate outside of the existing health insurance system. And we've saved about $10,000 a year by doing that. And the culmination of those tools is CrowdHealth, which we raised a $6 million seed round back in April to start, and launched marketing back in October, and have been have been flying since. It's been an incredible experience to see people really resonate with the fact that health insurance is not serving them well, and that they can do something else at a much lower cost.
So that's a great, succinct origin story. I appreciate it. So let's unpack why is insurance so broken? So I'm Canadian, and when I came down here, I had to navigate all of this because some things are covered in Canada, most things are covered in Canada, but obviously nothing is covered down here. So I'm still learning as I go. So I don't have the 30, 40, 50 years of experience dealing with this system. So it's very new to me, and it's something that's obviously very topical. So why is healthcare so broken in the US? First, walk me through that, because I think that's interesting. And even that one thing that you mentioned where I'm paying $1,200 a month for insurance, and then I go to the hospital, I get a procedure done for my daughter, and then it's not covered. How is that justifiable? How is that something that hasn't been rectified in the history of the United States? It doesn't make sense to me.
No, it doesn't make sense to me either, unfortunately. I think, look, the problem with healthcare, to answer your first question, is, a lot of people think the rising healthcare cost is a result of a very complex system, but it's not all that complex. If you think about the fact that health insurance plans actually have no incentive to reduce costs, and in fact, they have an incentive to increase costs. In the Affordable Care Act, so what is that, 7-8 years ago, they maxed out the amount of profit that a health insurance plan can make to 15% of premiums. So if you think about, just to use easy math, my premium is $1,000. They can only get $150 worth of profit out of that, profit and administrative costs. So they actually have to raise premiums to be able to raise their profits. So they are incentivized to see your monthly premium to go up. So in essence, you have the buyer of healthcare, the health insurance plans, wanting healthcare costs to increase. You have the seller of health, big hospital systems. Clearly, they want the price to go up because they want their profit to go up. So now you have the buyer and the seller of healthcare both wanting the price to go up. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out why healthcare costs go up. And here's the other thing too is, even if United Healthcare wanted to negotiate, right now our system is ruled by big hospital systems. So I live in Austin, Texas. We have 2 hospital systems. United Health Group, even if they wanted to negotiate with the local hospital, they can't because they have a duopoly. If they lose one, they lose access to most of the companies in Austin, so they have no negotiating power. So there's this mutually beneficial thing that the hospital systems and health insurance have going on here, that they just raise prices every single year, and there's no market forces to actually reduce those prices, and that's why healthcare expenses are so high. And so there's just perverse incentives within our system to increase prices, and that's ultimately what the problem is.
Now, so it's not great. I understand that we live in a well, at least in this part of the world, we live in a society that is driven by profit, and that's something that is pretty standard with business. Now, I'm not saying it's good, but I mean, it is the de facto. It's kind of how the U.S. works. People want to make more money, and they have to find ways to make more money, and that seems to be unfortunately something that is going to impact somebody's health and well-being. But the part that I really don't understand is, even if they are making money off you, how can they justify denying that claim? So that, I'm already upset that they're making a lot of money. That's fine. I can't complain about that. Everybody needs to make more money. They all have stakeholders that they have to make happy. Fine. But how do they justify when you are paying something like that? What would make it a medical necessity versus a non-medical necessity? It seems like somebody having a constant recurring significant health event should be something that could be considered a medical necessity.
Yeah, it's so opaque. There's no clarity and transparency into why they will agree to pay some medical bills and not agree to pay other medical bills. And I think it kind of goes back to this, 15%. If they're hovering at that 85% of your premium being paid on bills, they get pretty stingy with that, that last amount of dollars. So they got to keep it to 85% to maximize their profit. Here's the crazy stat that I didn't know before really diving in. 1 out of every 6 healthcare claims from plans on healthcare.gov, which is where most people go and get their healthcare if you're not getting it through your company, are denied. 1 out of 6 are denied, right? If you live in Tennessee, it's 1 out of 3. If you live in Texas, it's 1 out of 5. I mean, 1 out of 6 doesn't seem super high, but if you have an $8,000 bill and there's a 1 out of 6 chance that they're not going to pay for it, the vast majority of the American population is not going to be able to pay that $8,000. You don't have $8,000 laying around in an account somewhere that's like, oh, just in case I have a big medical bill and my insurance plan won't pay for it, I have this $8,000. Like, it just doesn't exist, right? And so that's why we're seeing 250,000 people last year who had health insurance went bankrupt due to medical bills. Like, the whole point of health insurance is so if you have a big catastrophic event, you won't get into financial distress. And we had 250,000 families last year go bankrupt, even though they had health insurance because of medical bills. That just doesn't seem right, right?
And that's just entirely the prerogative of the insurance provider. And is there no like ombudsman or anything you can do to appeal that decision or sue them? Like, is there any recourse whatsoever?
There is, fortunately. I mean, you can take it to the state. If most of these plans on an individual level are regulated by the state, and so you can take it to the state, but that's just a big bureaucratic, regulatory agency, and so
you need to pay your rent next month. And
if the bill collectors are calling you, right, and are just going to want to ding your credit score, all that happens before the state can typically engage, right? And so you're kind of sucked into a big bureaucratic, black hole. So there are some, but it takes a long time, and oftentimes it's you never hear and things like that. So it is not an efficient process for sure.
So you after that event with your daughter, you're like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm not paying for insurance because it's not doing anything for me, but I have to figure out something in case a $500,000 or $1 million bill happens. Then I do have to figure out how to deal with that event in my life. So this is the inception of CrowdHealth, correct? This is you were figuring this out on your own. You actually turned it into, you're a founder. You realize there's obviously a huge opportunity there, but it's still not easy. And we were talking before we started recording, like building out this category. So walk me through building out a category and then building out a company in that category.
Sure. And so one of the things I was thinking about is like, okay, so what happens if I get a big bill? What happens if I have cancer or, a big surgery or whatever? Basically 2% of people, have those big catastrophic bills. So it's a very low probability, but it could happen, right? And so, as I was thinking about how other people get their bills paid, when they don't have the money to do that, a lot of people go on these crowdfunding websites like GoFundMe, and so you submit your bill and most of the time those bills get paid. I think it's probably the number one category on GoFundMe is these big medical bills because people can't pay for them. Again, health insurance plan, a lot of times are not paying for these things. And so they go to, and so what if we could build a crowdfunding site that has some incentives for people to actually go and fund these, right? Like a young child having cancer is, much more emotional and, worthy of giving, right, than my 5-year-old has a broken arm or, my 2-year-old or 1-year-old needs ear tubes in her ears. Those aren't nearly as emotionally
they're not as like quote unquote sexy problems as somebody who has cancer, right?
Exactly. So, but what if we built a system where if I give to you, right, when you need help, you're more likely to give to me when I need help. So we build in a system where there's a law of reciprocity, right? So the way that ours works is you will submit money into an account. That account is yours every month. And so if you're between the ages of 6 and 54, it's $175. A little bit more if you're older, a little bit more if you're younger. And then you can use that money to fund others when they have needs. And so we'll ask you every month, it's like, hey, here's 10 people that have needs this month. Will you fund them? Yes or no? So it's totally voluntary. If you say yes to everybody, then you are one of those people that will step up when others are in need. If you say no to everybody, you are one of those people that is stingy and won't step up when everybody else is in need. And so When I have a bill, right, and I've been stingy, the probability of other people being like, yeah, I'm going to give to the stingy guy is really low, right? The probability of somebody giving to me if I'm the super generous guy is really, really high. And thus far, everybody who's been generous has gotten their bills paid, right? And so you build this reciprocity, and it's actually, look, it's the way communities have worked for thousands of years, right? If I'm in a community of people and something happens to me and I'm the Grinch, then there's not a whole lot of other people stepping up, and unless you're, Lucy Liu or whatever her name is in the Grinch. I don't know, I forget what her name is, but if you are the nice person on the block who brings you cookies when you moved in, like the probability of me coming and helping you is much, much higher. And so we're using that reciprocity within a crowdfunding type of platform to pay for medical bills. And the beauty of this is we're getting bills paid at about 50% of what health plans are paying for bills. So that $8,000 tubes in my daughter's ear, I put that out on LinkedIn, and a doctor, an ear, nose, and throat doctor, read it and came back to me and says, we do those all day long for $1,500 if you'll pay in cash. Right. So if I paid in cash, I could have went to this ear, nose, and throat doctor and saved $6,500. Right. That's, 80% savings. And so these doctors are willing to take significant discounts to what the health plan will pay them if you pay them in cash at the point of sale. And so that's where we're getting the vast majority of our savings. Is physicians hate health insurance as much as we do. and so they will take significant reductions so they don't have to wait 90 days to get paid. They don't have to haggle with the health insurance company. 30% of their time is spent with health insurance companies. And so they now have 30% more time to focus on patients, which is, as opposed to paperwork, which is what they really love, right? And that's where we're getting our savings.
So you're doing two things. So the CrowdHealth is a community, it's a platform, and it's not only leveraging the fact that you're speaking directly with physicians and specialists to give a reduced cost, but then there's also a crowdfunding component that allows other people in the network to pay for whatever it is that you need. And I guess, if I'm trying to, the concept is great. It makes a lot of sense. I actually think that when somebody dives into this for the first time, I sort of take my perspective when I look at it the first time. I always think like, well, it's a law of reciprocity and it's not guaranteed, but there seems to be almost an incorrect assumption that insurance is guaranteed, that insurance is safe because it's an entrenched institution that has been there forever. So there seems to be like a false sense of security with insurance and if you haven't been screwed like you've been screwed, then you won't understand that nothing is 100%. So that's where I see people looking at this alternative form of, I don't know what you call it. It's not insurance, because insurance it's a different thing. So it's its own category.
Yeah, it's its own category. I mean, it's really an alternative way to pay for healthcare, right? You're taking personal responsibility over your healthcare bills, as opposed to giving that responsibility to a health insurance plan. And as a result of that, you're going to save 50%, right? And is it guaranteed that your bills are paid? No. Is the probability really high? We think so. We think it's way higher than you getting your bill paid from a health insurance plan, given the 1 in 6 that I just mentioned, and that's from the Kaiser Family Foundation. Like, that's not my number. It's a legitimate, think tank coming up with that number. So that's where I think people are really not misunderstanding. The other thing is you've got these massive deductibles that you have to pay before the health insurance plan pays $1, right? So many of them are $6,000, $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 before the health insurance plan pays $1. From ours, one of our key metrics is we want 0 people going bankrupt using CrowdHealth due to medical bills, right? As opposed to 250,000 using health insurance. And so what we'll ask you to do is you pay the first $500. And so you step into the hospital, you pay the first $500, right? And then everything else we're going to submit to the crowd for funding. And so you don't have to worry about how much is this going to cost? What is my copay? What is my co-insurance? What is my deductible? What is my thing? It's like, it's $500, right? And you can have solace in the fact that, most people have $500 in the bank, that this is not gonna bankrupt you. And that's the whole point of health insurance. And so that's what we're really trying to push is that just kind of simplicity. I know the mechanics on the back end are a little bit more complicated because this is the first time people have heard this probably. But in essence, it's super simple. You pay the first $500. Everything else is submitted to the crowd for funding. You can choose whatever doctor you want. There's no doctor networks anymore, which is a huge benefit, right? And so it's just way easier to use after you get used to it than your typical health insurance plan.
And walk me through this, because the other question that I would have going into something like this is, what about people that abuse the system? Or perhaps flip the question, maybe people that they don't mean to like quote unquote abuse, but they do have recurring significant health expenses. Is that the target customer? Is that someone that should even be in this network? Or are there people that make sense to be in this network and people that it doesn't make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we want it to be fair healthcare, not unfair healthcare, which it feels like with the insurance plans, that's the case. And so, we'll accept anybody with the exception of two groups. One is smokers, because your costs are 4x what the normal, non-smokers are. And then if you are over 300 pounds, again, your costs are massively higher than everybody else. It's just not fair for you to participate in this. If you have a pre-existing condition, then the fair thing we think is for you to be responsible for those 100% of those in the first year, and then the crowd will help you fund those after the first year. So $25,000 in the second year, $50,000 in the third year, $100,000 in the fourth year. So it's just a fair way of doing this. And so no, it's not for everybody, but we think that the vast majority of the population fits within a range that makes sense for us. So, most of the folks who are signing up right now are 1099, type of folks, or they're solopreneurs, or they are in a small company that doesn't offer health insurance. And our existing customers are mostly those types of folks.
That makes sense.
So you're in a community of entrepreneurs, basically.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. Well, that's the thing. Like, I feel like somebody who is just an entrepreneur loves to try new things out. Like for me, I'd love to try stuff out like this because it's so new and it's just like a different way of doing things. Actually, sort of segues and dovetails into another question. It's how do you, as an entrepreneur, I am curious, how do you build something? How do you build this category? Like what are the actual steps that you took? Because again, we spoke about you're disrupting an entrenched institution. You're disrupting insurance. They have tons of money. Like, they're not going away anytime soon. They can lobby governments and they can do whatever they need to do. Insurance is not new. So how do you build something and how do you attract people to this? And what was your thoughts when you first started this company?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the big hurdles, right, anytime you're starting a company is just fear. A lot of us operate out of a sense of fear. And so I can't say I'm like this fearless leader because I've been super fortunate. My last company did great. We had about 400 employees when we sold the company, so it went awesome. So I'm in a position now where, one, I can take that risk, and two, a lot of the people in healthcare are fed in some way by health insurance plans, and so there is a disincentive to go after the people who feed you. Don't bite the hand that feeds you, right? And so that's why no other companies out there are trying to do this. And that's why a lot of the other entrepreneurs aren't trying to do this, is because they rely upon health insurance plans to do this. And so I'm in a pretty unique position to be able to go out there and give this a shot. And when I start things, it's because there's a gap. There is a gap there that's so big that it's worth the swing. Right. This is a home run swing. And I think that we will connect. And man, the last couple of months have been crazy in terms of people getting signed up and open enrollment's been over the last couple of months. And so it's been, the feedback has been incredible. And so we've been lucky in that way. But for me as an entrepreneur, it's go swing at something that could have a significant impact on the people around me. And this is one of those companies that can have a significant impact. I consider myself and even everybody on my team are missionaries. I mean, we are on a mission to change the way that healthcare is paid for, as opposed to mercenaries, which is just they're in it for the money. And I tell most entrepreneurs, I'm like, hey, if you're just in this for the money, it's going to get really hard. And so, is money a big enough of a motivator to drive you to do something, that is game changing? And a lot of times it's not. It doesn't make it through. So if you're mission driven, that's where I get, really, really excited about, the companies that I build. So this has been number 2. My first one was, helping old people, with their chronic conditions. And my grandparents were a huge influence on my life. And so they were in their 80s when I started that company, and they were a primary driver of that. And that was my mission, to help them live, a more healthy life without having to go to a nursing home. So that was, be missionaries for your startup. And that's to me the easiest way to do this.
I just want to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's episode, HubSpot. Now, HubSpot has an incredible podcast network, the HubSpot Podcast Network. My show, Success Story, is part of it. But if you love great podcasts, you have to listen to Imperfect Action, hosted by Steph Taylor. She cuts to the chase. She dishes out actionable strategies on online marketing, content creation, social media, and more. Steph is your marketing obsessed friend. She's been in the trenches for years. She shares what works and what doesn't, so you skip that costly trial and error. If you crave friendly, educational content that gets results, Imperfect Action is your new favorite podcast. Check out Imperfect Action wherever you get your podcasts.
You mentioned the missionaries versus mercenaries. In one of the other interviews that you did, you actually had five key things that you wish somebody told you before starting a company, and that was actually one of them. You had a couple really smart hiring lessons in this, in these group of five lessons. Another one that you mentioned was beware of big company experience, and I completely agree with you. But walk me through why that's so important as a founder trying to hire their first few employees.
Yeah, I mean, when you see a big company on somebody's resume, you ultimately think that part of the success of that company has to do with the person that you're talking to, and forget oftentimes that these big companies are big. They are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and they have tons of resources, and they have everybody doing lots of stuff for them, so they don't have to do a whole lot, right? You have executive assistants for executive assistants, right? And so I have learned throughout my 20 years now of being entrepreneurial. If hiring somebody from a big company is a really hard thing. They have to overcome a lot of the big company bad habits. They are not as gritty oftentimes as people in startups, and I mean that by just get it done, right? Forget about who gets it done, you get it done, and it may not be totally in your lane, but just get it done. And just big companies just don't oftentimes allow people to do that, whether it's because of bureaucracy or administrative or whatever. And so I like the grittiness of people who are, in startups and have been in startups or are fresh out of college, right? Who are like, I don't know, just tell me what to do and I'll go get it done. I love that. I love those gritty, and I'll take gritty over super high horsepower, any day. One of the other things I said, it might've been in that interview or maybe it's somewhere else, but give me somebody will work their ass off over a straight A student any day, right? The people who work their ass off know what it's like to fail. They get back up and they keep going after it, right? The guys who get straight A's, they don't know what it's like to fail. And when they fail and they get a B, it's like the end of the world. And I'm like, dude, we're in a startup. We fail every single day. And if we're not failing, then we're doing something wrong. We're not driving fast enough.
How do you find that in somebody though? How do you actually find that in somebody when you're interviewing them? How do you find? I guess it's like a little bit of like a grit plus chip on the shoulder plus, just figure it out. Curious person. What's the interview question to get that person in?
I think it's less interview questions. I'm terrible at interview questions. I'm bad, and so I actually have them do stuff. Like I'm interviewing somebody right now, and I said, okay, build me a corporate financial model. And he kind of looked at me like, I was like, hey, you're going to get it wrong, right? But like, how do you even think about that, right? And so it requires them to ask really good questions, right? It asks them to really think about what drives the business. They have to dig into the business and really try to understand it. They have to be good at Excel, which I think is the most important tool of business from my perspective. And if you don't know how to do that, it's really hard to excel. And so, I'm actually having them like do some work. The other thing I said is like, hey, here's CrowdHealth, here's what we're about. Who should I go after? Right? Write me a 2-pager on who I would go after and how I would go after them. Right? And it forces them to create some ideas, to get things on paper. And between those two activities, I can tell most of the time how they think, right? And can they think outside the box, get creative, or do they think really very much inside the box and have a really hard time with the gray, right? And that's where we are in startup land. It's just gray. Like, it's not black and white. Like, you just have to figure out and operate in a land of gray. And if they're not comfortable with that, it's probably not a good fit.
And do you do that for all roles that you bring in? Just
Most.
That's smart. It's a smart idea.
Because part of this is like, you got to think analytically, right? Regardless of what role you're in. I don't care if it's a salesperson or a marketing person or an operation person or whatever. It's like, you need to think analytically, and you need to have some kind of comprehension on how to do Excel. And if you don't know how to do a financial model, like a P&L, like, you're going to go figure it out, right? Which is a big part of a startup. Like, this is not, in a 100-page user manual, right? Like, did you have to go? It's like, no, you just have to figure this stuff out. So go figure it out, right? Go out, figure out how to make a P&L. And you don't expect as much from some positions as other positions, but I think it is a good tool to get a really good sense of how people think and can operate.
And let's flip that. When you're building a company in a new category, you're looking for certain people, certain mindsets that you're bringing in, but also walk me through how you market something that no one's ever heard of before, or they've only had their first exposure to. What's the playbook for that?
Yeah, you got to be so different and so much better than the alternative that people are like, duh. Like, why didn't I think of that? Right? Duh. And that's hard oftentimes. Like, and it's hard now, right? Because I'm marketing, and we spent, $1 million over the last 3 months, marketing. And we've gotten some really, really good feedback, but a lot of people just look at you like, what the heck are you talking about? Right. And so, one of the things you have to realize is that you have to pick a group of people that you think will really resonate with your brand. Right. And what I'll tell you right now is the people who are resonating with our brand are the people who are typically very high on kind of personal responsibility. They're like, I want to take care of my own healthcare bills and not have a health insurance plan get in the middle of this. And so we've been all in on those types of people. They are the Bitcoin people. They are libertarian. They are those types of people, and they're entrepreneurs, right? Like, entrepreneurs tend to be like, hey, I let me control my own destiny, as opposed to just relying on a health insurance plan, and you never know what they're going to do, right? And so we've been all in on those types of folks, and it really has resonated with them. So it's really like, find your customer, who does it resonate with, and go from there. I will say that we've spent $1 million on marketing, but we tried about 20 different distribution channels to get our message out, and we tried digital to traditional to print to all kinds of different things, and even within those, we've segmented a lot of different ideologies and political spectrum and thought, all of those, just to see is there a group here that this tends to resonate with, and I think we've found who those early adopters are going to be, and so that was our approach.
Very interesting. I just know how difficult it is, so I can only imagine building a marketing strategy for an industry that doesn't exist yet. I can't imagine it's easy. I'm looking at you.
Kind of emotional getting fired up, right? I mean, because if it's not an emotional sell or purchase, it's going to be really hard to get people to actually buy, especially like something like health insurance, which is, typically like, oh my God, like the last day of the month, every month has been our biggest day because people wait until the very last moment to figure out what they're going to do with paying their healthcare bills for the following month. And they find us and they're like, oh, wow, this is really, really cool. But it is the last thing you want to deal with, and a part of that is because health insurance sucks. I mean, it really does. And so we really want to make something where it's like, no, this way to pay for your health bills is actually pretty cool. And you're just going to save a ton of money and you're going to help other people. And, that's great, right? That's a great alternative to what we've been forced into.
One other thing that you mentioned, and I've heard this said different ways before, but I'm curious to understand how it applied to CrowdHealth. So do things that are unscalable and then learn how best to scale them. So what does that mean in a broader context, and how did you actually apply that to CrowdHealth when you quite literally need a certain mass of people to make the entire business model function?
Man, it's hard, and we're almost like threading a needle, right? I mean, you really are. I think I've said that in that interview too, is doing things that are unscalable. I mean, there is a desire from the beginning to automate as much as you can, right? And for me, it's like, man, everything that has to do with the customer, I want to own and manually do so that I understand what that customer is like and what they're thinking and how they're reacting and things like that. And so there was this idea internally at the company of, there's these little chat bots down in the lower right-hand corner of your website. And so they're like, okay, well, let's just come up with all the questions that we think people will, have and what the answers are to all those questions. And we'll chat bot it because that's the best way to scale all the interest that we'll get. And I was like, no, let's not do that. Let's all get on the chat and all answer these questions, all 10 of us, including the CEO. I think I've spent more time on that chat bot than anybody else answering questions from prospective customers because now I know what they're asking. Now I know what their objections are. Now I understand our customer a lot better. And that's an unscaled way of doing something that I think will help us scale because now we understand the customer a lot better that you just don't get from a chat bot, right? And plus those chat bots are so annoying. If you type in one letter wrong, it drives you bonkers, right? And so one of the things that we are on scaling too is we have your personal care advocate. Like you will have somebody that you can talk to every single time that you call into CrowdHealth, right? The same person. So you're not going around, a big call center and you have to explain your daughter has tubes in her ears and they're costing me $8,000. You don't have to do that 20 times to get an answer. You're talking to the same person every single time, right? And that's an unscalable way of doing things. But we think in the long run, if you have a health condition, you will call that person and we can help you and guide you to a really good doctor who at the end of the day is going to be way less expensive than if we did it in a way that, is call center oriented and you may not have gone to that great doctor. And so we think in the long run, it's going to save us a bunch of money. And it's just a way better customer experience. Some of these things that these big companies do to scale is a terrible, terrible customer experience. I mean, call into your cable company, right? I'm trying to cancel my security system right now and I can't freaking get somebody on the line, right? It's a terrible customer experience. We want to have an awesome customer experience, and we think in the long run, that's going to allow us to scale a lot faster than if we had lots of automation or lots of outsourced call centers and all that kind of stuff.
And as this industry, this category grows, there's obviously going to be other competitors. So what do you think is going to be the defining factor that differentiates CrowdHealth when there's 20 other alternatives that also do a crowdfunding healthcare expense coverage model?
Yeah, I mean, I think we got to grow fast, quick. What is differentiating, Tesla and Apple and, all these other companies that have kind of defined categories, right? Define their own Uber, define their own categories. I mean, it is a big base of people who are relying upon you. And if the faster we scale, the more people we have, the lower costs we can then get. And so you're actually driving costs down as you scale up. And as you're driving costs down, you can actually lower the price for your customers. So that's kind of the core goal here, is to scale up to get the price down even lower than what we currently have. And we think there's probably 20 or 30% that we can drop it from where we currently are. So, and then I think, again, we're not going to get swayed by the, do it quick and cheap. We're going to do it slow and probably a little bit more expensive on the administrative side, because we want an awesome customer experience. I'm a rabid customer experience person, and I think that this is going to scale with people telling others. I had CrowdHealth. It was so easy, and they care about me, and they pick up the phone when I call them, and they're not declining bills and all these things. Like, that's what I want CrowdHealth to be. And if you can kind of build up that brand, then I think that goes a long way from some of these other, wannabes.
I want to pivot and ask a couple rapid fire questions to close out and just get some insight from your career and your experience. But what do you want? What's the impact that you want to have on the world as an entrepreneur with CrowdHealth? If you could summarize it, what do you want to be known for when you're all said and done?
Yeah. So as an entrepreneur, I really think in my current gig, I think hopefully this is a 25-year gig. It is, significantly significantly changing the way we pay for healthcare costs. Our goal is 400,000 people saving $1 billion over the next 5 years, a year. And so that's our goal. I really, truly believe that we can change the way that healthcare is paid for, which will alleviate so much suffering in this country. That's what I get fired up by.
Great. Amazing. If people want to connect with you, go check out CrowdHealth, socials, website, where do they go?
Yeah, joincrowdhealth.com is our website. We're on all the socials at Join CrowdHealth. So come and visit us there for sure.
Do you want to drop your socials too? I don't know if what's your favorite, like your LinkedIn, your whatever, it doesn't matter.
LinkedIn is at Join CrowdHealth, Instagram at Join CrowdHealth, Twitter and Facebook are all the same, Join CrowdHealth.
Oh, no. I meant like for you.
For me?
Yeah, for you, yeah. You're the...
me.
Yeah, you never know. I think you have you have a great story, and this is like not your first rodeo. Like, I put it out there in case, I don't know, you're into building your own brand or whatever. You're on podcasts. I just wanted you to drop your own social.
Twitter. You can go on Twitter. It's Schoonover and then Andy. So last name, first name, and then you can find me on Andy Schoonover at LinkedIn. And I'm not an Instagram person, so go to Join CrowdHealth on Instagram, and that's me. Like, I post everything on Instagram because I want it to control that voice. So I think you can go on it. It's kind of fun. We take a fun approach to healthcare as opposed to this old white guys in suits. We are a young crew in our 30s and 40s who are having fun, and we think we're going to change the world with this.
Good. Awesome. Yeah. I was looking at the Instagram. You got some memes on there. I like the vibe. It's good. Very good. All right. Let's go through some rapid fire. Biggest challenge that you've had to overcome in your own personal or professional life. What was it and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, man. Not to maybe TMI, but my wife and I, we lost our first daughter about 10 and a half hours after she was born. So talk about, just incredibly huge challenge that people can take and let it destroy them, or can take and say, okay, how does this, impact me as a human being, as a person who's in a marriage, and our marriage is much stronger now than it ever would have been without losing Grace. And like I said, we had two daughters after her, and so a huge challenge.
If you had to choose one person, obviously there's been many, but one person who's had a major impact on your life, who was that and what did they teach you?
Oh, man. Yeah. So my first, not real boss, but my boss's boss, Chris Nacetta, out of college, I was working for a hospitality company. Chris was the CEO of Host Hotels and Resorts. It's the largest hospitality REIT in the country. His focus on people, and just like loving on his people and not treating them like crap like you see a lot of people doing nowadays. The love of people is incredible to me. He's now the CEO of Hilton Hotels. And I'm seeing it even when he's at Hilton. He figures out a way in a company they must have hundreds of thousands of employees to just make his people feel loved from the CEO seat. Is just an incredible thing.
Amazing. And that's like super, super, super important too. He sounds like a very good person, because that's hard to do as a CEO. Very hard to do as a CEO. You had to choose one source to learn or grow. It could be a podcast, Audible, something that you've loved and you just helped you on your journey, and you would recommend other people go check out.
Man, it's sitting on the shelf behind you. The book is Play Bigger by a number of authors. You'll find it on Amazon. Yeah, it is such an incredible read if you want to build a company, especially trying to totally disrupt, not even disrupt an industry, building a new category, something brand new that's never, ever been thought of. Go look it up on Amazon, Play Bigger. It's an incredible, incredible read.
If you could tell your 20-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Man, my 20-year-old self, I would probably say nowadays, don't do college and go work at a business.
Interesting. Why is that?
Yeah, I think that, college was pretty much let's go have fun. Anything, as I saw Elon Musk the other day say, anything you really want to learn, you can learn on YouTube for free. And I truly believe that's the case. College was a great time. You have fun, you get into trouble, you do stupid stuff, which may be just a part of maturing, and maybe I was a late maturer. But I don't believe you learn a whole lot in college, and I can't tell you a whole lot of things that I use today that I learned, back in college. Especially the first couple of years, when you start being specific in finance and things like that, you start learning things. But I would probably not do college and try to work at a startup, even if it's at an intern or something, and learn by doing.
And last question, what does success mean to you?
Yeah, it's number of people impacted. I think too many times in today's day and age, we worry about how many zeros are at the end of our, bank accounts. And to me, it's like, how are you changing the way that people are living in this world for the better? And healthcare for me is the clearest example. And so I really think that, success is how many people you can impact in the short life that we live.